Alright, let's recap quickly what we did inside the lab. Notice that this is my tree here. I have an extra folder called illustration. You do not have to create this. I'm just creating this to demo what I want to illustrate now. So I'm gonna create a new file. I'm going to call this index.html, and notice I do not leave any spaces like that, right? If you want to make it index1 or home1, just make it with an underscore. Do not leave a white space. This is gonna ruin things in the future. So having it like this, I'm going to click enter, and notice that the extension is really important. Do not forget this. Okay, so now we have our index.html inside our illustration folder. You can have a shorthand and just type in atom HTML, and you're gonna click on this. If you saw the previous video, I've just showed you this part already, and you can hit enter, and it's going to create the layout for you. I am not going to do this now just for this lab. I'm just going to create it from scratch to show you what is the layout. Typically you have 3 types of tags. These are the main tags that you should have in your web page. Okay, so you have the HTML tag. This is the main tag that wraps everything in your web page. Inside the HTML tag you have a head tag and another body tag, right? So the head is the one that contains the settings for your website, and the body is what contains the actual content that you see whenever you open the website. All right, and the syntax goes like this. You open up the tag. This is the opening tag for a specific, let's say that maybe this is a body, this is an h1, and this is whatever tag it can be. So this is the opening tag, and this is the closing tag. The closing tag always starts with a forward slash, the one that you find beside the shift button on your keyboard, right? This is called the forward slash, and in between you put your content here. Whatever text, whatever thing that you want to show that this tag actually accepts, you're gonna put it inside, right? So let's just create the HTML first, and this is the closing. Notice how I just created the opening and the closing just to know where did I start and where do I finish. Okay, so I can keep track of my tags. And finally, or not finally, let's just hit head like that and type the head tag. Let's just close it as well, and I'm going to make an alignment. I'm just going to click on tab on my keyboard, tab like this, instead of typing spaces, white spaces, just to make things aligned, right, for readability. And let us create the body tag, and this is the closing for the body. Okay, and these are the main tags that you need in your website. Okay, so let's start with the head. As we said, the head has something called the settings. Okay, and notice that what I did there is called a comment in HTML. In Python, if you remember, comments started with a hash sign or a bound sign, right? But in HTML, the comment starts with this layout and ends with this layout. So if I wanted to write this slowly, you can just type the right angle bracket. Oops, I'm sorry. The right angle bracket like that was okay, and hit on the exclamation mark, and then 2 hyphens, make a space, another 2 hyphens, and the closing angle bracket, and here you go, you have a comment. So in this comment you can type whatever. It doesn't have to be something that is HTML specific. It can be anything that just denotes that the following couple of lines are doing something. So the following couple of lines, in my case, I just want to denote that this is going to be the settings part of my website, and I can as well indent this so everything is on the same level, right? And notice that you're going to see a small blue circle. This means that the file currently is not saved, so just make sure that you save this continuously. Hit Control S or File Save, whatever suits you, whatever is quicker for you. Okay, alright, so the only tag that we have seen in the setting is the title tag. As you've seen, the title tag, just as the head, the body, and the HTML tags are opened and closed. They have an opening pair and a closing pair that starts with the forward slash. Now I'm going to mention real quickly another tag that can be used in the settings or in the head section here, okay, that we have not mentioned inside the first lab, but Dr. Yasser has mentioned in the second lecture. It's called the meta tag. It's called the meta tag, right? I'm going to remove this and I'm going to write it slowly without using the shortcut. Okay, so I'm just going to make the opening tag like this. And notice something, in the meta tag, it's one of the tags that do not need you to do something like this. It doesn't need you to make a closing pair, because by default, this kind of tags, which is, we're talking about the meta tag, is called a void or empty element, or tags if you want to say them, tags or elements, right? So these are called empty or void tags, meaning that they do not have a closing pair. All right, it is just like that, and HTML takes care of closing them for you, so do not worry about this too much. All right, we are going to see, I think you have seen this in the first lab if you focused. We had the image tag, right? And we had I think the image tag was the only tag that didn't need a closing pair that you have seen in the first lab and the first lecture as well. And there's as well the link. We haven't seen the link in the first lab, but Dr. Yasser mentioned in the second lecture, and we're gonna see this in the second lab, and it's the same. It doesn't have a closing pair, so the meta is no different. Okay, so this is the meta tag. What does the meta do? Let's just put a comment in front of every text so we know what does each tag do to us, right? So the title just gives you a name for the opened tab, right? The open tab in the browser. This is the open, all right? As we've seen in the website that we've made, it's just a title, right? The meta, whenever you hear the word meta, generally, it means the underlying information, right? That's typically what meta does in anything. Like you want to hook up the word meta to anything, it's gonna mean the underlying information, the things that are happening behind the scenes that helps whatever, that helps the engine, that helps the browser, that helps the some kind of software to do a specific task. In this case, the meta tag is there to help browsers render the website based on the, you know, the kind of text that you have. Maybe I have something in the body. I know that we shouldn't write text like that, right? We should always write our text inside a paragraph, inside, you know, a heading. You shouldn't write text directly in the body like that, but this is just to introduce to you or to illustrate something. So maybe you have in your text something like Arabic text or Japanese or Chinese, and your browser is not that familiar with this kind of text. So you need to give the browser some heads up. You need to tell them, hey, listen, this website is going to include some text that might not be English, because I know that you browsers prefer the English language. This is your default language, right? So you can render easily, right? And by render, I mean rendering means displaying content to the screen, displaying content on the browser. Okay, so this is what renders mean. So browsers by default likes to render stuff or text that are English, or images that are easy to render, like pixels or like JPEGs and GIFs and stuff like that. But most of the time, unique things are not considered. So you need to just give a heads up to the browser, telling him something like this: please make the character set or the encoding technique that will be used, right? Char set here is an attribute or a property. Remember when we said in the previous lab, in the first lab, I told you that you have the tag name followed by a white space, right? So this is the tag, that's just the tag, right? If you want to add properties or attributes, you will need to have a white space like that and put any kind of attribute or property. In Atom, properties are highlighted by this, you know, this yellow label, and you can see, you can tell that the char set, as you're seeing here, this is a specific, if you remember our talk on attributes, attributes can be specific to specific to certain tabs, or it can be common, it can be attached to any kind of tag. Okay, so char set is specific to the meta tag, and content is specific to the meta tag, and HTTP equivalent is specific to the meta tag, and the name as well, right? The other stuff, the other properties that Atom is suggesting in the autocomplete here are just common attributes, right? So these attributes are not specific to some certain tag. You can hook up a property called class, right, or context menu to any tag that you want, meaning that I can come to the meta. You didn't take classes yet, I understand this, but we are going to illustrate what a class property or what a class attribute actually means in the next lab. So you can hook up a property to the meta class or to the meta tag like this, saying that I want this class. Notice that any property is followed by an equal sign, right, and a double quotes, and inside these double quotes are the values that you want to set. Okay, some attributes, some properties have a predefined value, so you cannot write anything that you like, and other attributes, just like the class, can have whatever value that you as a developer come up with. So as a programmer, I can come up with a class value that is something like this, my meta tag, and this is something that I just came up with right now, and that's fine. Okay, the class attribute or the class property allows you to come up with values that it's for your own choice. Okay, but some other attributes, I'm just going to make a space. You notice that you can put multiple attributes or multiple properties beside each other with just a white space. Do not put a comma like that, right? Just a white space, and we can add another attribute that is called charset. And notice that charset, first of all, it has a specific range of values. It has a specific range of predefined values. So if you type something like UTF-8, it's going to suggest that this is the standard. Okay, this is something that charset usually takes. So this is a predefined value. So we can hit enter, and it's going to be like that. You cannot type something like my encoding or my encoding algorithm. It doesn't work like this. Charset is one of the attributes or properties that has its own predefined values that you should pick from. Okay, so what we have done here so far, we have introduced what is called as attributes or properties. All right, and these properties, this is a property called class, and this is the value of the class property. This is another property called charset or an attribute, and this is the value of the attribute charset. And I've told you that some attributes are, this is the first type of attributes. Some types of attributes are tag dependent or tag specific. Like the charset. The charset is something that is related only to the meta tag. You cannot come up to the title and say that I'm going to give a charset to the title tag. I don't know what's going to happen if you did this, but maybe it won't work. Maybe the page will not render. Maybe you're gonna have some kind of an error that you're gonna see only a blank screen. But the charset is one of the tags that are only meta tag specific. It's related to the meta only. Okay, so these are the attributes that are tag specific, just like the charset for the meta tag, and as the as the source and as the alternative for the image tag, if you remember the previous lab. And the other type of attributes is or are the common common attributes, are common or shared between tags, or shared between any tag. Just like the class or the ID. We never talked about the ID yet, right? But we're gonna see this in the next lab. So the class is one of the attributes or the properties that can be hooked up to any tag, right? There is no dependency, like there is nothing like this tag only requires a class. No, you can hook up a class to anything. So I can come up to this title. Usually you do not put a class to the title, so I'm just going to come up to this body, for example. I'm just going to say this is body class. Okay, so that's fine, and you can give a class to any tag that you like. That it's a shared attribute that can be, it's a common one, it's a common attribute that can be hooked up to any tag in your HTML. Okay, so let's remove this class and let's understand a bit what this charset means. The charset is just an encoding algorithm, right? It's an encoding standard that helps the browser renders the kind of text to what it actually represents. So UTF-8 is a universal encoding algorithm or standard that helps the browser if you have an Arabic text, it helps the browser identify that this is an Arabic text, so it gets displayed as Arabic. Let me show you a very old character set encoding technique that is not used anymore. It's called, I think, yeah, I think it's this one. Okay, ISO. Okay, so let me just go right click and show an explorer, and let me just open this web page. I just want you to see how Assalamu alaikum looks like. So it looks like this. It's gibberish because the ISO is not that powerful, that it doesn't cover the Arabic language. So it doesn't know how to tell the browser that, hey, listen, this is Arabic, so you need to render it as how Arabic words look like. It doesn't know how to do this. Okay, but if you change this into UTF-8, and this is the standard, that's the most recent and standard encoding technique, right? And you hit Control S, and I went back and I refreshed, you're gonna see that this is the actual Arabic representation of what I've written inside the body here. Okay, all right. Another kind of a meta tag, if we just write the meta like that, let me just use the key bending here. So I'm just gonna hit enter. You're gonna see that it's gonna give you two attributes that we haven't seen before, the name and content. And typically this specifically, maybe this you're gonna need this, and you're gonna see the reflection of this tag in front of you when you are working. But the name and content are something that you will not notice until we do something called deploying our website. So the website has actually a formal link that we can visit from, right? And you do something called a search engine optimization, SEO, right? After we do these two things, deploying and SEO, we are going to notice what is the name and content. I'm just going to show you what this actually looks like, because it's going to pop up really, like, mostly all the time if you are using Atom or Visual Studio Code or whatever. So let us just say that this name is going to be something like description, and description is one of the predefined values. And let's just say that I'm going to give a description to my website. So whenever anyone searches for the website, he should see the following content, which is, this is a website that gives you the latest trends. Okay, so where do you think people are going to see this kind of description? For our level right now, since we are doing everything locally on our machine and we do not have a link to provide to anyone to visit our website, we will not see the effect of this meta tag. So if you want to comment it out, or if you want to leave it, it's totally up to you. It's not going to reflect to anything so far yet. Okay, but let's just see how does this look like in a real world application. So let's go to Chrome here, and I'm just going to search for Twitter. And notice whenever you open the first link, or you see the first link, you're gonna see this kind of description. From breaking news and entertainment or whatever, this is the description. This is done via the meta tag, right? But this will never appear to us because we, first of all, we do not have a link for our website yet, and we do not have what's called a search engine optimization, which is whenever you type anything in Google, Google will be able to find that link and puts it in the first maybe 10 or 20 results. Okay, so you need to do these two things in order to see your link, right, and your description. Let me just open up Twitter and show you where do you find this exactly. Remember the sentence? The sentence is from breaking news and entertainment to sports and politics. So we can hit and Control-Shift-I. I'm just going to open up that application so you know what am I doing. Okay, so Control-Shift-I, right, and hit Control F to search for description. Okay, and where is it? Yeah, this is the description. This is the meta tag. It's just written a little bit differently than the one I've showed you with the name and content, but it's typically the same thing. And instead of the name, they use something called property, and that's totally fine. But the point is, inside the content, you're gonna see from breaking news and entertainment to sports and politics. It's the same thing that we've seen, right? It's the same thing that we've seen from the search result, right? So the content that you put is what you actually get to see here. Okay, so this is your this is your content. Okay, if you want to have this, if you want to leave it, it's not gonna affect anything so far, so I'm just gonna leave it like that. That's totally fine. And let's get to continue what we are doing. I'm just going to close this application, and yeah, so let's start with the most important things. Let's talk about, first of all, headings. And please do not confuse headings with the head. This is the head tag. That is the head. This is for the settings. The headings, what I mean by headings is either H1, H2, H3, or for anyone who is a little bit advanced in HTML5 specifically, you're gonna notice something called a header tag. Header or head or H1 or H2 and H3, all of these are headings, and these are put inside the body tag, and they are totally different than the head that is the settings. All right, that is supposed to be including the settings of your website. So let me just write H1 and copy this a couple of times, and I'm going to say that this is let's say, first of all, let's give a title. So this is going to be headings, and this is going to be a very large heading, and I'm going to copy this and put this here. Large heading, let's say medium heading, like that. Okay, and I'm going to have this as H1. The first two are H1s. This is gonna be H2, and this is going to be H3. And as you go, as you make the number bigger, as the headings are going to get smaller, as you're gonna see. So I'm just going to open up my live server. Oh, it's already running, so that's fine. Let's just start it again. Okay, let's traverse to our HTML file, illustration, index, and here we go. This is the headings. This is the title for our current section that we are talking about, and this is the H1, the largest. This is the H2, and this is the H3. Okay, I just want you to be familiar with the developer tools, because it's really important to know these kind of tools that is provided to you by the browser in order to debug our code. In fact, this is the only way to debug and take a look on how our code is looking like in the browser. There is no other way to debug front end or web design than that, right? So I might have the application running again, so you can just see what I type. Okay, so I'm just going to hit Control-Shift-I again, so it's gonna open up the terminal or the developer tools. I am not really sure what is the key binding for Mac users. Please search on this one. Just type what is the key binding for opening developer tools on Chrome or on Opera or on your default browser. If you do not want to use the key binding, you can just go anywhere in your browser and hit on this, for example, hit on this heading, right click and inspect element. Okay, it's going to open up the same thing, and notice that this is the same as our code that we've written. This is the same HTML file, right? So if I expanding this head, you're gonna see the same comments that I've made. These are the same comments. These are the meta tags that we've made, right? And this is the website here, so website, right? And these are the headings, the same are the headings here. And there is a small script tag that we have not put there. This is by default is put by the browser. Do not worry about this. When we get to JavaScript, you'll understand what this script does. Okay? Okay, so let me just make this a little bit smaller. Alright? So if you hover over any of these tags in the body, notice that if you hover over anything in the head, nothing is going to be highlighted, because as I've told you, the head is regarding the settings or the underlying information of your website. Nothing is displayed from the head, right? The real layout, the real content is inside your body. So let me just hover over the head. As you're gonna see, the H1 or any of these headings are spanning all of the width of the viewport or the screen, right? So it's taking the whole width. One would say, why isn't the heading taking only the size of the word. Like it should have this width, right? No, it's taking all of the width, right? How did I know that it's taking all of the width? Well, if I just maximize this a little bit, you're gonna see that it's telling you that the content, the original content, is highlighted in blue, right? There's something called padding, and padding is internally having spaces in between inside the tag. I know that you don't understand this now, but we are going to take this in more advanced details in the next lab. But the padding are internally some spaces, all right? So it's internal spaces, that's it. And a border, just as you've seen in the previous lecture when the Dr. Yasser showed you the table, you can have the table has a border, itar, a frame, right? We do not have any frames or any paddings here, but by default, every H1 has what's called a margin, and a margin is an external spacing. So the padding is an internal spacing and the margin is an external spacing. If you do not understand what this means, it's fine, it doesn't matter. We're gonna take this in details in the CSS. But I just wanted you to make sense of what is going on with the colors here. Why am I getting the blue and the orange colors whenever I am hovering over the tags? What are these colors? I just wanted you to make sense of these. So most of the browsers are using these standard colors by default. Like this is universal or standard between most of the browsers, whether you are using Chrome or Opera. So any browser is gonna have the margin as orange, the border in, I think it's light green, and the padding is in green, and the content is in blue. Okay, so the headings are what we've called a block level element. If you remember the block level elements here. So block level elements are going to stack over each other. Why is that? Because typically they are spanning the entire width of the screen. So there's no way if I put another heading after the first one to come right beneath of it, or right next to it, right? So it's gonna come beneath of it, right? Because it's taking the whole width of the screen. And this is what's happening. You might ask yourself, why did this H1 that I've written, like this H1, why didn't it stack next to the first one? Like there is enough space here, right? And why is this one didn't come next to it? And that's because by default the headings, or the H1, H2 and H3s, are called a block level element. And block level elements, as we've discussed in the lab, they by default span the entire width of the screen, as you're seeing. So the content here is not just the words. The content which is highlighted in blue whenever you hover over any one of these is the entire blue row here. Whenever I hover, this is the content, that's the actual content, regardless of whatever number of characters that we have written. That's just what it is. The heading takes the entire width of the screen, okay? And the heading by default has a small margin, and this margin is something like this, okay? The heading has a 21 pixels margin up and down, right? It doesn't have a margin from the right or the left. There is no margin here or margin there. We only have a margin from the upper part and the lower part, as you're seeing, okay? And you can tell that this is a 21 or 22 pixels up and 22 pixels down margins, okay, and on every one of these headings, right? So bottom line, these are block level elements because they span the entire width of the screen, and this is the reason why block level elements are considered as blocks, and they stack beneath each other and they do not stack next to each other on one row. All right, so I just wanted to show you the developer tools for now, and we've discussed the first type of the elements. So we have here block level elements, okay? And the first block level element that we've seen was the headings, right? What do we have else as the block level elements?